Shiva Sri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 16, verse 23. Yadvambate Bhuri Bar Avatara Kritavatarasya Hare Darati Antarhitasya Smarati Vishishta Karmani Nirvana Vilambatani. Translation. O Mother Earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hare, incarnated himself as Lord Sri Krishna just to unload your heavy burden. All his activities here are transcendental, and they cement the path of liberation. You are now bereft of his presence. You are probably now thinking of those activities and feeling sorry in their absence. Purport: the activities of the Lord include liberation, but they are more relishable than the pleasure derived from nirvana or liberation. According to Srila Jiva Goswami and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, the word used here is nirvana vilambatani, that which minimizes the value of liberation. To attain nirvana, liberation, one has to undergo a severe type of tapasya, austerity, but the Lord is so merciful that he incarnates to diminish the burden of the earth. Simply by remembering such activities, one can define the pleasure derived from nirvana and reach the transcendental abode of the Lord, to associate with him, internally engaged in his blissful, loving service. Translation. O Mother Earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hare, incarnated himself as Lord Sri Krishna just to unload your heavy burden. All his activities here are transcendental, and they cement the path of liberation. You are now bereft of his presence. You are probably now thinking of those activities and feeling sorry in their absence. So the questions here are all true observations of the condition of the earth and why she is suffering. One after the other, we have different things described which are all true with the coming of Kali Yuga. The earth is here addressed as Mother, Amba, and Maintainer, Daritri, comes from the root Dara, or Dara, etc., like Giridhara, holding up the mountain. So it means to support. The earth is the supporter of everything. And we say metaphysically or philosophically, everything needs a foundation. Any existence needs a foundation. So spiritual world is founded upon the Dham, abode. It has supported by the Sandhini Shakti. We get the Goloka or Vaikuntha, etc. So similarly here in the material world, we need some support. So we have lokas, we have planets or spaces, bhumandala, etc. for the living entities. So that's described in the Bhagavatam, where you have sarga, visarga, and sthana. Sthana means the place. Each living entity needs its place to exist on Earth or anywhere, higher planets, lower planets, or whatever. So they need some support. So the Earth acts as a support of everything. Physically speaking, there is a little prayer that the smartas and others in India recite, they're supposed to recite when they wake up every morning, when they get out of bed, before they put their foot down on the floor. They say, please forgive me, Earth, for stepping on you. because obviously we're stepping on the earth all day long. But this is a burden for the earth also. And it's an insult to the earth also, putting our feet on the earth, because the earth is also Devi, it's a goddess. So one should take permission and forgiveness for stepping on the earth and giving burden to the earth. And we find that the earth is a support of everything. And of course under that we have the big turtle. There's a turtle there, there's Anantashesha holding up everything. So it requires a lot of effort to hold up the creation and all the living entities here. So it's a big job. Therefore, it's a burden for the earth, not just the weight in terms of all of the planetary systems and then the living entities on there, but we have an extra weight. This was the weight of sinful activities caused by the demons like Kamsa, and therefore it's described that there was a burden of the earth, a great weight on the earth that had to be removed. So the Supreme Lord comes to remove the burden of the earth. So it's not just the people are there, but they're demoniac people with sinful activities. So that becomes a big weight, the sinful activities of human beings. Previously I mentioned that the human being has a special function which has its responsibility. We say the human being is responsible for his activities, and therefore he gets karma, and everything he does affects the earth. Animals don't really have karma, so they don't create a burden for the earth like the human being. So the human being, if he acts according to dharma, and he doesn't commit sinful activities, and he does punya, very good, no burden for the earth. But when he breaks the laws and he does sinful activities, then the human being creates a big burden for the earth. Why is it a burden? It's a burden because when the human beings commit sinful activities, they're just breaking the law, and the law was made for a certain purpose, to keep the harmony in the world, keep things in balance. And if we break the laws, we're upsetting that balance, and then we cause a lot of problems by that in the world. So the sinful activities are, we can say, unnecessary violence in this world. And when we do that, in other words, we exploit too much, we eat too much, we kill too much, we do everything in excess, we don't control our senses, then the earth gets a burden. It affects the earth. And this is, of course, we can say symbolic in one sense, but it's also actual. We know nowadays that, they didn't know this before probably, but so therefore they would just come and cut down all the trees and kill all the Aborigines and do everything they want, to exploit, pull out all the gold and do this and that. Now we know that these activities do have an effect on the earth and actually reacts upon us, and then we end up with a lot of suffering later on when we kill too many, chop down too many trees or whatever, or pollute the rivers. So we're feeling the effects in the modern world more and more. And yet we can't stop it, we keep doing it. So every year you find that they're chopping down more forests. Amazon forests are getting chopped down like anything, and Indonesia, they're chopping down forests or whatever. They can't stop it. People cannot stop it because of their greed and their desire, we have to live, etc. So when we go to excess, then the earth gets the burden as a result. And it affects us in many different ways, so we end up with more suffering because of that. So the earth suffers with a burden, and then the human being has to suffer. Everybody has to suffer. And everyone will continue to suffer until the balance is brought back again, which may take a long time. So anyway, the earth had a big burden when Kamsa and everyone else was there, because they were very sinful. One of the things they did is they stopped the sacrifices of the Brahmanas, so therefore the Devatas were dissatisfied. So we know in Bhagavad Gita that you have to keep the cycle turning. The human being has to do sacrifice, and then the Devatas give the rain, and then the crops grow, and then the human being and all the animals and plants, they can all survive very nicely. So, but when we interrupt that cycle, and we don't give the sacrifice to the devatas, then problem. So this doesn't mean just we mechanically offer things to devatas, but one, we understand that we are not independent, and that we depend on food from others, and therefore we have to understand that we have to limit ourselves, and we have to show gratitude for whatever we take, and not take too much. Okay? So that's one aspect of the worship. And of course, ultimately, we can go higher than devatas and understand Supreme Lord, which is the purpose of Bhagavatam. So though there are devatas, above the devatas is Supreme Lord, and he is empowering the devatas to give elements for the survival of life on this planet. And if we please the Lord, fine. Then everything comes. If we don't please the Lord, we don't get. So there's an offering of sorts. So that was codified in the form of sacrifice using Vedic mantras. You have to offer something. Of course, as we all understand, it was explained already that in Kali Yuga, we have a different sort of sacrifice that is chanting the holy name. Same function. It is also yajna. It is offering to the Lord. It's recognition of the Lord and what he's doing for us. Okay? But different form. That is easier. Everybody can do it. Sound vibration. In any case, that helps relieve the burden of the earth. Worship of the Lord, yajna, chanting the holy name. This all helps settle out the burden. The other aspect is, of course, don't make a burden in the first place by excessive sinful activity. So follow the principles of Dharma. And that way the bull is got 4 legs, very nice, and can stand firmly. Then earth is satisfied. Start taking away the legs of the bull, then the earth is not satisfied, and we end up with problems. So when Krishna was here, he killed all the demons, and therefore, and he put Yudhisthira on the throne after the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and everything was very good. Earth was stabilized again, Dharma was intact, worship of the Lord was there, earth was happy, etc. Then Krishna disappeared. He removed the burden of the earth, then he disappeared, and then what happened? The burden came back again. Kali Yuga started. So this is personification of Kali is running around here banging at the legs of the bull. So, and three legs are gone now, and 1 leg is left. So again, earth has to lament again. So the question here is, are you lamenting because Krishna was here and you removed the burden, but now he's disappeared? So that's true. And now that he's gone, the burden has come back, and therefore cow must lament, and human beings must get into problem because of that. So very, very apt question, which we can say summarizes all of the other conditions that were previously described in relation to the lamentation of the cow, why she was suffering, and all the different conditions of the human being, etc. So very, very pertinent question to ask. Nevertheless, the Lord cannot always personally be present to remove the burden of the earth. He comes sometimes and he disappears. So the Lord also makes arrangements when he's not here. So one, of course, is the good kings. Even if the Lord isn't here, if we have good kings, as Parikshit was, good king, then okay, we can relieve the burden of the earth. When the good kings are not there, then it's going to be a problem. So generally, the Lord makes that arrangement for good kings because he has these Manus and their descendants reigning for 71 yuga cycles, 14 times in the day of Brahma, and that goes on usually. Unfortunately, in our Kali Yuga, everything is degenerated and there is no king. And Manu's descendants are hiding, and he's hiding in the Himalayas someplace and refuses to cooperate. So we're stuck. We're in a very bad condition in our Kali Yuga. Big burden is created because there's no one to keep the sinful activities in check properly. But as I mentioned, apart from the Dharma aspect, there is the worship of the Lord also. And that is intact in the form of the Nam Sankirtan. So even if we don't have the Dharma intact with the Varnashram system and the king, if we chant the holy name, then we can also please the Lord, and we can get rid of all the problems of the earth that way. So this is the alternative presented to us in Kali Yuga. Of course, the other alternative already presented here in the first canto is that now that Krishna is gone and he's taken Dharma with him, what do we have? We have Bhagavatam. So hearing about the topics of the Lord, discussing the topics of the Lord, reciting the topics of the Lord, also a good way of destroying the sinful effects of Kali Yuga, restoring Dharma that way as well. So both of these things are very powerful to help us get relieved of all the problems. So here it also mentions about the activities of, it's called nirvana, which means liberation, usually having, for us, a negative connotation of impersonal liberation. But in other places, other religions, it's not so negative because it means the final goal. And so we have Brahma Nirvana, merging in Brahman as the final goal of Jnana. So there, it doesn't, for the Jnanis and the Buddhists, it does not have a negative connotation. It's it's the ultimate goal, ultimate success to reach that level. However, the devotees of the Lord disregard that nirvana as being insignificant, and instead they take up the process of bhakti instead. So in the first line here, purport, the activities of the Lord include liberation, but they are more relishable than the pleasure derived from nirvana or liberation. So hearing about the activities of the Lord gives liberation, but it's actually more pleasurable than the other processes and the other result we get. That is called the impersonal liberation. Whatever that takes to get to liberation in that process, actually hearing about the activities of the Lord is much more pleasurable than that liberation, even though hearing about the Lord does give liberation, which is explained also in the Nectar of Devotion, where it says that a person, one of the characteristics of bhakti is the devotee in bhava stage derides liberation, thinks it very insignificant, even though it's the goal of the Gyanis and the yogis, and they will endeavor for thousands of years to get liberation. The devotee feels it's useless. So this is a unique feature of bhakti yoga as compared to jnana and yoga. They completely disregard it because, as is mentioned here, there's more pleasure in hearing about the activities of the Lord. There is more pleasure, there's a greater bliss in the performance of bhakti and prema and serving the Lord. So for some people, nirvana is bliss. And in one sense, yes, it is an aspect of the Lord. We have Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan as three aspects of the Lord. They're called Advaya Jnana. It's one entity. They're not separate things. Paramatma is the same as Bhagavan, and Brahman is his part also. Like the rays of the sun, the light of the sun is non-different from the sun. So Brahman is also Supreme Lord. You can't separate them. They're together. Nevertheless, we know that the ray of the sun is not exactly the same as the sun because it's only got a small portion of its Shakti. It does not have all the functions of the whole sun, even though it is intimately related with it. So Brahman is like that. It is a weak representation of Bhagavan. We can say it's a minimal realization of the Lord. Like realizing his effulgence, or realizing his, what they call in the in the Bhagavatam and other places, the yogis realize one ray of the light reflected from the toenail of Krishna. One little ray coming out of his toenail. That's the amount of Krishna realization that the yogi gets through his impersonal realization. So it's a part of the Lord, so therefore in that sense we cannot criticize it. At the same time it's minimal. And therefore the devotees disregard it or reject it because it leads to non-duality, in which one does not distinguish anything. It is consciousness without an object of consciousness. So one cannot perceive the Supreme Lord. Everything is one. So one has no perception of things. So therefore bhakti cannot survive. You cannot have bhakti be there, because bhakti means I have an object of love. There's no object of love there. It's just oneness, consciousness of nothing. It's suspended animation, so to speak. So that is why the devotees deride it. One, the bliss is not the same. Secondly, it becomes impossible to do bhakti in that position. And they prefer that bhakti with the Supreme Lord. So therefore they reject it. So the word vilambatani can mean support, but it also means that it minimizes, they minimize the value of this impersonal liberation when the Lord is present, and then minimizes that value of liberation. So therefore the devotees prefer the process of bhakti yoga. And it includes whatever good aspects are in liberation. So nothing is lost. The bad aspect is you cannot see the Lord or perceive the Lord, and you don't get as much bliss. The good aspect is you are free from karma, you are free from ahankara and identifying with the material body. You are very peaceful. So yes, that's also there in bhakti and prema. You're free of the material world, free of karma, etc. It's eternal. That's the good aspect. So in that sense, you're liberated. But you go beyond the peaceful aspect, and you have a relationship with the Lord. You perceive the Lord. You develop feelings in relation to the Lord, and you get bliss through that. So that is the that surpasses liberation. So that's the position of the devotees of the Lord. So here the Lord has disappeared, and consequently the burden has now returned to the earth. The Lord himself is purely transcendental. And he's taking all his good qualities with him, and therefore the earth is again subject to all the problems, etc. But as I said, even though the Lord does that, he disappears and he takes with him all the good qualities. He is very merciful, so he also keeps something here. He keeps the devotees here, keeps the process of bhakti here. And of course in Kali Yuga then he advents again as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he gives us the Yuga Dharma. So we do have a solution to this problem that is created by the disappearance of Krishna and the lamentation of the cow. So if one performs bhakti with the cow, of course the bull, they're directly talking about the bull and dharma, but if one performs bhakti, then cow is also pleased. So that's the other way, not just to restore dharma, but to do bhakti. The cow is also pleased. So by doing bhakti and chanting the holy name, then we can satisfy the earth again. Everything is proper, and naturally dharma also gets repaired through the process of bhakti. So that's the solution for us in Kali Yuga. Any question? It means nothingness. I think the Buddhists say it means to extinguish everything. That's what they call it. The near means negative. So it means destroying everything, a negation of existence, material existence. So in strict Buddhist philosophy, everything is illusion, including perceptions, the mind, ego, dream state, waking state, objects. They're all unreal. It's all false. But we live in this dream, and we go on life after life. This is a strange dream that goes on for everybody, which is false. So the whole idea is to get out of the birth and death and that illusion. And when one does, then that's it. Nothingness. Everything's gone. For the Shankarites, who we call covered Buddhists, it's somewhat similar, but slightly different, because the nothingness is Brahman. It's a something. It's not nothing. In the Buddhists, there is no God, there is no matter, there is no jiva, there is no subtle body, gross body, nothing. And there is no spiritual world, and there's no God, and there's no jivas. Ultimately, you realize nothing. And just get rid of the whole illusion. Illusion and nothing. Those are the two things that are there in Buddhist philosophy. Shankaracharya's philosophy, there's illusion and there's Brahman, which is like nothing. Because it has no form, no qualities, no activities. So one Brahman, and there is illusion. So we call Brahma Nirvana. That means that type of, it's like the Buddhist Nirvana, but there is something there, the Brahman. It's the emergent Brahman, it's like nothingness. Because there's no form, qualities, activities, no jiva, only Brahman, and you become Brahman. So that's the nirvana for the Jnani, Mayavadi Jnani.
Buddhism, do we call it Shunyavadi? Shunyavadi?
Oh, Sunyavadi, that's the Buddhist. Sunya means zero, nothing, nothing at all. So that's they believe in nothing ultimately. That's the Buddhists. The Nirvisheshavadis, that refers to the impersonalists who follow the Vedas. They say there is Brahman, but the Brahman has no qualities. Nirvishesha means no qualities. So there's no form to God. He doesn't do anything. There's no Shakti of God, no spiritual world, nothing, only Nirvishesha Brahman. That's impersonal Brahman. That's Nirvishesha.
So when we practice Shiva Prabhupada, his pranams,
yeah. Oh, it means he saves us from Buddhism, Mayavad philosophy, and things like that. Which relates to the Western world. Of course, it's everywhere, but in the Western world, Buddhism is also popular, and impersonalism popular. So Paschatya means the Western countries, and Taranya means he delivers. He delivers the Western countries where Sunyavad and Nirvisheshavad are prominent.
So even not necessarily, there's not necessarily a school of philosophy in the Western world, but it's like more like materialism and science is prevalent, and that's impersonalism and also Shunyavadi with it, like reductionist scientists, they're like kind of like Shunyavadi.
Well, in one sense, they believe the world is real. But some people in the West become Buddhists, like some scientists are Buddhists, some quantum physicists are Buddhists. So if they're going to do anything, they want to be somewhat religious, and they become Buddhists rather than anything else, Christians or whatever. They don't like the idea of personal God and anthropomorphic God with a body, so they'll prefer the impersonal aspect, either Shankar philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, among scientists and intellectuals. Or we see that among people in general also, if they're going to go, they generally gravitate towards impersonal aspects. So we see people practicing Buddhism and like this.
Description of the time period when Jnana reaches Brahmajyoti and spaces.
How long? Vishwanath indicates that if he does attain that, he gives up his body and attains that state, it's eternal. Huh? And if he has what we call Jivan Mukta state, he gets a samadhi or a realization when he's got this body, but he doesn't worship the Lord, then he falls. If he actually worships the Lord, then he can give up the body and merge into that Brahman and become a more or less permanent state. So then it's like that. I think in the commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam there, Sanatana Goswami says it is possible even there in that Brahman state where the jivas are, that by the great mercy of the Lord they could advance from there, but it's probably not so common. Because they're already stuck into a state of no awareness of anything. It's difficult to get out of that state once they're there.
Hare Maharaj, just trying to understand Western concepts. Just in the West, so much we don't have the Mayavadis or the impersonalists.
Mm-hmm.
They're more like if they're not theists, they're agnostics or atheists. So with atheism, it's sort of the subtle difference would that be just that the atheist doesn't believe in anything like no life, no reincarnation, no afterlife, no reincarnation.
Yeah.
One famous Western person, Bob Geldof, once said that he's just looking forward to dying, so when he dies there's going to be absolute peace, there's just going to be nothing when he dies. Believes of this capitalism. Would that be a correct service of atheists?
Well, I think there's different types of atheists also. Some atheists who'll be hedonists. They'll just be trying to enjoy the material world, like Charvaka in India. He developed the philosophy, the Lokayat's philosophy. So the Atma is the body, and the goal of the body is enjoyment. So therefore the goal of life is enjoyment. There is no soul, there is no afterlife, so we just enjoy as much as we can in this lifetime. that was his philosophy, and he had some followers also. So that's materialism, atheistic materialism. So it can go in that direction, and it could be very sinful also if we go in that direction. So some materialists go in that direction. Others, some scientists for instance, are not so sinful. So they have some morals, etc. like that. And we have some philosophers also, like existentialists and other persons like that as well. They don't get too involved in sinful activities and sense gratification. So usually they have moral standards, let's say, within the atheism also. Moralistic atheism. So we got the hedonistic atheism and we got the moralistic atheism. Of which I guess the moralistic one is better because at least they don't commit so many sinful activities and don't commit so much violence on the earth. So that's a better position than nothing. But it's very difficult to even maintain that moralism with atheism, because it becomes meaningless. If there is no afterlife, there is no God or whatever, then what's the whole point of being moral at all, really? And there's no witness to it either, ultimately. So there's no support for the moral standards you have even. It's not absolute, it's relative, so then it doesn't make too much sense to follow it even. So, it's not a very, stable type of thing to be moralistic but atheistic.
So a lot of these moralistic atheists, the only thing that drives them is that they want to leave a footprint when they die so the world can follow, so they can sort of glorify them after death.
Yeah, fame. Yeah. Of course, the maybe the better aspect, the only way they can become really famous, which will be lasting, is if they're philanthropic. They do pious activities. Then they get the admiration of people, and that may continue into the future. So that's the only option for them in that case, do some philanthropy. So they'll try to do a lot of that, and but what is if they're really atheistic, then what is the motive of that? It's another type of pradishta. That's all it is for them. I think Bhagavatam says, what's left of all these great kings in the past? Nothing. They get eaten by the jackals ultimately, and whatever, they get their bones rot or something like that. So what is the value of all these ancient kings that are glorified in history? Useless, like that. So, but still, people will try. If they don't believe in afterlife, at least the good name will carry on. So they try to get a good name by philanthropy.
So that only that yoga makes you attain the ultimate goal. So I was just wondering, in Satya Yuga, were people practicing Bhakti Yoga or the Ashtanga Yoga?
Well, all these processes in the yugas are bhakti. What did they meditated, but it was not impersonal meditation, meditation on Vishnu. They do homa, that's a homa for Vishnu. They do deity worship of Vishnu or Krishna or whoever, form of the Lord, and Kali Yuga is kirtan. So it's all connected to the Supreme Lord, and all those processes are bhakti.
So was Ashtanga Yoga and Satya Yoga connected with the goal of attaining the Supreme, not
Yeah, not necessarily Ashtanga Yoga, but meditation is part of bhakti also. It's one of our angas, 64 angas of bhakti also, so to meditate on the Lord. So you can just sit there and meditate on the Lord. Yeah, and that's called, jhana also. You use mantras like Vishnu mantras or Krishna mantras or whatever, meditate on the Lord.
And the deity worship in Govardhana Yuga started with, it was always in Vishnu, isn't it? Because when we see that... Usually it's Vishnu worship. Yeah. Krishna started after...
He came at the end. Yeah.